So a couple of more that I thought we should define at the onset is determinism, compatibilism, and libertarianism in the context of this argument.
Yeah, okay. So determinism is the thesis that facts about the remote past, in conjunction with, say, the laws of nature, entail that there's only one fixed future. So the idea of determinism is that everything that happens is the necessary consequence of preceding events and actions in combination with the laws of nature. And it was the sort of dominant view that came out of Newtonian physics, the kind of classical physics of Newton and Einstein and Maxwell. And it raises a problem about free will, because if determinism is true, i.e. everything everyone does, or whatever happens, not just human behavior, but all events and actions in the world are determined by antecedent events, how can there be free will? And so it raises a kind of traditional problem, sometimes called the problem of determinism. And so a number of views emerged out of this. One view is called libertarianism, one of the terms you said to define. This is not the political view of libertarianism. This is a metaphysical view. The political form of libertarianism comes later. The libertarian in the free will debate is someone who thinks that if determinism is true, we lack free will. Because if determinism is true, agents lack the ability to do otherwise, i.e. what they did in that circumstance is the only thing they could have done, or determinism rules out a kind of required notion of sourcehood, i.e. the agent is the appropriate source of their actions. Because if determinism is true, the source of our actions drains back to events in our antecedent past, even going back before our birth. So the libertarian says if determinism is true, we lack free will, but we have free will. And so we have a kind of indeterminate free will, a free will that requires that our actions be undetermined in some specific kind of way. Now, different libertarian accounts spell out what's required in different ways. One very famous kind of libertarianism requires that we're a kind of agent that is distinct from our physical makeup. That is, we're not wholly determined by our brain chemistry and our neurons and certain electrical activity occurring in our brains and nervous system, but that the agent is a kind of cause that's able to act in a way that they themselves are uncaused. So we are little uncaused causes. We're capable of causing our own behavior, but we're not determined by antecedent events. That's a very problematic notion of free will because it requires certain kinds of commitments that most naturalistic philosophers are inclined to reject. It requires a kind of agency that doesn't fit very well into our best philosophical and scientific theories about the world. There is another view called compatibilism, which is the view that says you can be both determined and free. That determinism can be true, and yet we can still be held morally responsible for our actions, because what's required for free will is not the falsity of determinism, but that our actions are caused in an appropriate kind of way. That is, they're caused either by our own internal psychological states, our own wants and desires, motivational preferences. And as long as they're caused by these internal states of the agent and they're not constrained or compelled to act in some kind of way, that we should call that action free and the agent should be held accountable. That's probably the most dominant view in contemporary philosophical views in terms of the majority of professional philosophers, probably are compatibilists. I argue that that view doesn't really preserve the kind of free will that we want, and that we have good reasons for rejecting it, but I don't want to get into that quite yet. So that's sort of the landscape. I would just add one thing. My own view is that whether determinism is true or not, we would lack free will. So my view is a little bit more nuanced in that I think that if the universe is deterministic, we would lack free will because agents would not be the appropriate source of their actions in the way that's required. Their actions would ultimately be the result of factors beyond their control. But if indeterminism is true, if we introduce some just indeterminacy in the sequence of events leading up to our actions, that wouldn't preserve free will any more than determinism, because on that kind of a picture of agency, the individual, you, would not be able to settle which outcome occurs, because indeterminate events are no more in control of the agent than determinate events. If they're the result of just quantum probabilistic behavior, that doesn't seem to be the kind of agency we view when we think of free will. You know, the agent would not be able to settle which outcome occurs in any more, appropriate sense than if determinism was true. So, like, if there was just a sequence of events leading up to my choice whether to make coffee or tea this morning, and I choose coffee because of some quantum indeterminacy that maybe percolates up to the level of neural networks and affects my choice to choose the coffee. Well, if I were to rewind that tape and play it over and over again, if it were truly indeterminate, every replaying would have a different outcome. But that doesn't seem to be what we want when we want free will. We want an agent that's capable of settling which outcome occurs, not leaving it up to chance or mere probabilities. We want the agent to be able to determine that I choose coffee and not tea. We want the agent to be able to make a difference as to whether I choose coffee or tea. And on a model that just posits indeterminacy simply in the level of events, it would seem that the agent wouldn't have the ability to settle which outcome occurs. It'd be the byproduct, again, of factors beyond the control of the agent. So whether it's determinism or indeterminism, it would seem that our actions are the result of factors beyond our control.